without taking up too much more of the time and trying to getting these logistics settled, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to our presenter today. Her name is Danielle Blocker. She is one of the founders of an organization called Young People for Progress. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Danielle to kind of give her intro and kind of a little bit of her background in this work. She does really like awesome community organizing, and she's going to be leading today's session on how to create advocacy and issue campaigns. So without further ado, take it away, Danielle.
Perfect. Can everyone hear and see me? Type a thumbs up or say yes if you can hear and see me.
Yeah.
Perfect. People can hear and see me. Well, Anika, thank you so much for the great introduction. And I have to say that I have organized with a lot of different folks, have organized with fast food workers, professors, housekeepers, for, unions, city campaigns around minimum wage and healthcare. Let's see, statewide campaigns, worked with a lot of seniors, etc. But I am especially excited and honored when I can work with young organizers who, some of y'all are 14 and already, ahead of people in their 60s. But particularly the energy, the willingness to challenge existed norms and ways of thinking that we bring to organizing is absolutely necessary in order to make changes and improvements in our issues. So I'm really excited to be here. And I'll open with a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. So the name of this training, Organizing, Advocacy, and Electoral Engagement. We'll be doing a lot of that, but we'll particularly be starting with issues and problems first, and how we choose the things that we are organizing around. Problems and issues. So some people might wonder, we're talking about advocacy. Why are we starting by talking about problems? Anybody have any ideas? Feel free to type it in the chat. I know it's a rather sad place to start.
I feel like the reason we're talking about it is because like advocacy is centered around like solving problems, right?
Absolutely, that is absolutely correct. You can't advocate for a problem that isn't there. Yes, it's centered around solving problems. It's important to know what you're advocating for or what you need to address. Advocacy fix problems. All those things, perfect. We're already this is great. We organize to solve problems, absolutely. Knowing the situation and what the problem is a huge part of developing the solution, right? And so many problems in the world: police brutality, environmental degradation and destruction, mental health crisis, human rights and treatment of immigrants and refugees, gun control, homelessness, lots of different problems, right? So general societal conditions or systems that negatively impact our communities. And then I know people wrote the problems that they are advocating against here. Animal rights, and then a lot have their names: disability and environmental justice, climate action. Okay, so some people have the problems that they're working on. Some people have the names of their organizations. But for those who haven't written like the problems that you're working on, could you type it in the chat just real quick? menstrual stigma, education equity. Climate. Absolutely. So these are all really big problems. Racial justice, rights of women leaders, equity in healthcare. So for the person who types environment, and any other people working on environment, and I'm going to assume a little bit of climate change. How do we solve climate change? Because we're here to solve problems. And folks, feel free to help them out if they have any solutions. Reducing carbon emissions, reducing greenhouse gases, encouraging sustainable living, holding corporations accountable, funding to engineers. Absolutely, all these things. And how about educational equity? How do we solve that? Segregation. Funding. Absolutely. So we're already kind of naturally thinking in the way that we need to solve these things. Will desegregating schools or creating better curriculum solve all the problems with educational equity? Probably not, right? Or will funding environmental engineers solve all of climate change? No, likely not. But they give us a place to start in something targeted, right? They give us particular solutions. So problems, right? They're big, huge problems. People often say war on whatever, drugs, poverty, crisis, mental health, etc. So because it is hard to solve huge problems like this, we break them into smaller solvable issues that we can build on, right? What issues we define and how we organize around those issues kind of depends on how we want to solve those issues, right? And so there's a lot of ways and there's a lot of different types of organizing that we can use to solve these specific issues, right? And so the problem of COVID, huge pandemic, we can work around direct service organizing, which is providing immediate help. We are going to provide people diapers or groceries, for example. Self-help, which is when the people affected by the problem organize amongst themselves to help each other out. So, a mutual aid network where we all pitch in to help buy each other groceries, self-help. We can do educational organizing about how bad the problem is. We can do elections, so we can vote people out who didn't address this well. We can advocate for solutions with decision makers, and then we can protest about it and do other direct action organizing, right? And so there are many different types of organizing we can do to address these problems and issues. this workshop and presentation today will specifically be applicable to advocacy and direct action organizing, these types of things. Some of today can be, helpful for direct service organizing, like soup kitchens or homeless shelters, but less so. It's particularly because what we'll be talking about today is more types of organizing that challenge existing power relationships, right? And so having a soup kitchen is super important because it provides for people's immediate needs. And none of these forms of organizing are better or worse than the other. But as movement organizing, we are looking, okay, how do we change the systems that cause these problems, right? And so it'll be mostly this. Perfect. So we have large problems. Let me check in the chat if there are any questions first. Perfect. Talking about educational equity and housing. Cool. Sounds good. So we have these large problems. Like, for example, we have climate change, right? I can't solve climate change. I don't know any organizations that will solve climate change all at once. And thinking about solving climate change all at once kind of makes me feel defeated, because that's a very big problem. I can't do that. But I can solve a smaller issue within that. I can win funding for engineers so that they can build more sustainable infrastructure. I can win legislation for cap and trade, right? So that different companies have to cap the amount of emissions they have, right? And so we break problems up into smaller issues so that we can measure the impact we're having on that huge problem, but also so that we can feel agency and feel empowered to work at this problem, right? If the problem is a pie, we are just taking slices out of the pie. We're taking bites, bit by bit, until eventually we take bigger bites and eat the whole pie. But we're not going to eat the whole pie at once. So, for example, police brutality, mass incarceration. It's a huge thing. We can break it up into smaller issues of, first, we're going to get police out of schools, right? Then we are going to have all police wear body cameras. Then we're going to have a civilian oversight board. Then we're going to have transparent disciplinary records of police. So we can know, okay, which police officers have been accused or convicted of misconduct and which ones haven't. And over time, we keep winning issue after issue. And not only do we learn about the problem as we solve each issue, we also build our organizing skills, our capacity with each win. And people join us, because when they see us win something small, they're like, oh, they won something. And more people join with every win. So, issues are specific, winnable, have a significant impact, so they are deeply and widely felt, and they have a clear target and decision maker. But before we get into issues any further, I'm curious, has anybody seen any organizing or protests, what have you, that didn't really have a clearly defined issue? Feel free to type it in the chat or just say it out loud. Wow, you guys must be around some like phenomenal organizers because they always just identify the issue just so well. I went at some of the BAM protests I went to. Maybe that was supposed to be BLM. Black Lives Matter protest. There wasn't a clear target or demands. Okay,
May I add something?
go for it.
So I've been to several protests where there are clear demands, but they aren't really made clear until you're in the middle of the protest. And it's like, you're coming out just for the general purpose of supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, but it would be good, like, if they wrote on the flyer, these are our demands or something, so that you're not, I don't know, like, maybe, for example, you support police abolition instead of police reform, or the other way around. And by just going to a generic Black Lives Matter protest, you might be supporting speakers and organizers who are fighting for one thing when you're actually fighting for a different method. So yeah, I don't know. It's just sometimes they make it clear, but they don't make it clear ahead of time, if that makes sense.
And so for those protests you went to, how did that make you feel when you didn't really know what the goal was? And how did those protests turn out?
I mean, I think they still turned out well. I've just seen more success from the protests that, like, there was a protest called Demand DC, I think on August 1st. And when they were posting the flyers and the route for the march and everything, they posted their core 4 demands, which is, I think, like, why they called it Demand DC. And it was like, we want to get the MPD out of DCPS. We want this. We want that. I don't even remember what they were. But, like, it was very clear ahead of time, like, okay, these are the demands, like, this is a common goal that I am, fighting for with all of the people I'm meeting up with at this protest. And so I think that helped the turnout of it, and it also helped people, figure out what they're going to write on their signs and stuff like that ahead of the protest, and to get people excited about it, as opposed to just saying, oh, here's another Black Lives Matter protest. They're happening every single day, but, like, what is the specific purpose of this one?
That was really helpful. Thank you. And then Cleo mentioned that they've been to some climate change protests or know about climate change protests, but that didn't have any specific goals. And Cleo, if it is okay and if you're able, could you talk about 1 or 2 of those protests and how they went? Maybe they are muted. Feel free to jump back in if you want or can. Cleo is talking, but is muted. Can't hear. Oh, people can hear? It's just me who can't hear?
No, I don't think anyone can hear.
Okay. So we'll come back, but that was a great example. And if Cleo wants to jump in at any point again with that, we'll be really curious to hear about the climate ones, because I've seen a lot of climate protests with, like, very clearly defined issues and some not. So that'd be very interesting. National walkouts in 2018. A lot of people weren't aware of the specific goal of the walkouts. And Lily, what were those walkouts for?
Honestly, I wasn't entirely sure. Like, I know that I think the main reason was to just, like, show support for the movement. I know that one person said, like, the goal was to defund the NRA, but then, like, another goal was, like, just to show that like, there were students backing the cause and stuff. But I think a lot of people just kind of like not in a bad way, but they kind of got swept up in it, and they were like, okay, we're gonna walk out, we're gonna show our support, but then you know, like besides showing support, no one was really sure how else to support the movement besides just like walking out.
That's a really good point. A lot of walkouts. Maybe I am dating myself, but a lot of people said the same thing with Occupy Wall Street. They were like, what do they even want? They're just in camps, right? Cleo typed in the chat that for the climate change example, a lot of people just say, stop climate change. But the question is, how? Well, what do we do, right? And Gabrielle wrote, getting attention can be a legit goal. But if you're doing that, you need to specifically identify the power holders you're trying to get the attention of. Sounds good. And Cleo, if you want to add, looks like your headphones are working now. You're welcome to. And if not, that's fine too. Okay, sounds good. So we will move on. Absolutely. So now Gabrielle brings up a good point that getting attention can be a legit goal. Are there any, do people have any counterpoints to not having protests without clearly defined issues? Does anybody want to push back? Are there any exceptions?
I feel like, or this is Annika, by the way. I feel like you need both when you're protesting or pushing for an issue, because there are some specific, you know, actions that should be taken and demands. But at the same time, if you're trying to like bring attention to the movement in general, like, for example, the Black Lives Movement, it's like not about, it is also about pushing specific demands, but it's also about just bringing general attention to the fact, you know, to the racism and discrimination and police brutality against minorities and Black people in America. Just like the attention wouldn't have been that huge if we like focused on like 3 demands per se in these past couple months. I feel like more people were involved because of the general push. I feel like most movements should start general and then get specific. I don't know, my opinion.
Okay, yes. Avery mentioned that's an excellent point. Huge part of the Black Lives Matter movement is getting people to admit the issue or the problem exists and requires attention, right? And, you know, there's also some pushback to that saying any protest can be just to raise awareness about the cause. And so this is a great point that it's good that we're talking about, because some people do have different thoughts or, you know, theories or opinions about this, right? Different schools, and it depends on context. Some say we just need people in the streets, numbers, etc. And then others don't. Occupy, I'm going to go back to that example, right? Lots of Occupy Wall Street happened in 2011. Lots of people took to the streets. They took to parks in New York, one right in front of Wall Street, you know, on Wall Street, but cities all across America just going and camping out. Some people, you know, were homeless, so like, we're going to do this, and saying, you know, the 1% has too much. We don't have enough. We're mad. And, you know, we're there for weeks. Tried to define the issue at some point. You know, a lot of people said, yeah, you're disrupting things enough. We will give you what you want if you just leave, go home. What do you want? So we can just have you leave. And some said, well, we don't really know what we want specifically. We're just mad at the 1%, right? I was one of those people who said, what are they asking for, right? But then at the same time, that general huge amount of people changed the narrative and changed the language that we use to discuss class, etc. in America. So people started saying the 1%, so news pundits, reporters, etc. Right? That they didn't say it before. Now people, some 9 years later, still use the language, the 1%. And other movements with more clearly defined demands were able to use the change language and use the attention that happened from that to fuel their thing. So the Fight for 15, where people raised, minimum wages in cities and states across the country, used language that was formed in Occupy Wall Street. Even the Bernie Sanders campaign really just used a lot of language and stuff from that. So there are some times when some movements don't win clear demands in the moment, but set up future movements or change the language in the framing to have different discussions. And same could be said for some of the walkouts around gun violence, just having the number of people. Same with BLM, just having so many people say, we're mad, rushes people to think of solutions. Right, and then, pushback. Lily mentioned Black Lives Matter movement wouldn't have gotten a lot of attention without all the marches. But, people were confused. So there need to be some specific goals. One question people also ask is, should you wait until you have specific and defined goals to protest? Some people say, yes, wait to protest, until you have the things that you, ask. I might be to the contrary. I might say no, me personally, because I think, there are movement moments when something happens, right? George Floyd gets killed, whatever, and you just need numbers and you need people. Don't miss the moment. But as the movement goes on, at some point, you don't have to, have those goals, issue goals or demands immediately, but at some point, you need to have something specific, even if it's not in the first days or weeks. And which brings to the next thing, there is a cost if you never define issues. Because if you and your people don't define the issues, the opposition and the powers will define and frame the issues for you. Issues will get framed either way. Do you want to be the person that says what we're fighting for? Or do you want, whoever else it is to be, right? People mentioned walkouts for school shootings, right? There are multiple issues that you can, or specific issues that you can frame from that. Some students said, you know what, we're gonna frame it as we need gun control. Others tried to frame the issue and said, you know what, this is exactly why we need police officers in schools. Or this is exactly why we need teachers to have guns, right? And people tried to use that, like, oh, there's a thing, let's define the issue, right? Same with COVID. Some people are choosing an issue of COVID of their systemic racism. Some people in the current presidential administration tried to frame it as immigrants are less clean or people of color are less clean. The president's, someone in the administration literally said, Black people need to wash their hands, right? That might not be the issue you want to choose. But if you wait and don't define it at all, someone is going to define the issue, and it might not be the thing you want. And oftentimes, if you wait for the powers that be or the opposition to frame the issue, they will so often frame it as the fault of the individual. It's, this issue is about individuals' choices or individuals not being responsible instead of systems that need changing. So with mental health, right? Many folks have tried to frame the entire issue as self-care. well, people have mental health issues because they're not taking time for self-care. And they should just, in addition to their work and all the other things that they're doing, they should make time to do yoga or what have you. Nothing wrong with that. But some have tried to push blame away from our stressful schools with so many standardized tests and so much pressure and so much homework, or, you know, the increasing isolation, low paying jobs, debt, rising cost of living and housing, other things that frame it too, you know, with climate change. If you just have stop climate change, right, will you get really big changes like companies need to decrease their emissions in factories so you don't have things like Flint? Or will you have those companies who are pumping out emissions into the environment choose the issue as, well, individual people should recycle, or this is bad because you're not using plastic bags, right? And so it's very important that you define the issue before others define it for you, and that even when you do define the issue, you will have to fight to make sure the issue is framed in the way that you want it, as opposed to the way the opposition or what have you wants it. And so we'll be talking a little bit about how to create good issues so you can win the, you know, solution or narrative, right? And so going back to the slides, gotta be specific, gotta be winnable. So in some places, Black Lives Matter, we've been talking about that. Folks had the issue of, we're just gonna disband the entire police. That kind of worked in Minneapolis because that was the epicenter and there was enough power that it could be winnable, right? Some people wanted to do that in Montgomery County, Maryland, right outside of DC. A lot of people here on this call are in Montgomery County. That disbanding the entire Montgomery County Police might not be as winnable in Montgomery County, where the police brutality definitely exists, but hasn't gotten as much coverage, right? So do you want to have such an extreme demand and have a whole campaign and tactics on something that you may not be able to win, right? Significant impacts, clear target. Alexandra brings up a good point. Do you want to do this? This is a good issue. People will absolutely put words in your mouth if you don't identify with all the time. Perfect. Beautiful. So part of having good issues is having a clear target, right? Which is a specific decision maker that can grant you what you want, and, you know, make that happen, right? So that decision maker has a name and a face and an address, right? A decision maker is not Congress or the council, right? It is a particular congressperson or a particular city council person that has the most sway, that will make the deciding difference and what have you. And having a clear target is just as important as having a clear issue, because targets will often avoid blame. You know, how many of you have said, you know, we want to get police out of schools, and you go to the school board and they say, oh, no, we can't do it. It's actually the city council. Then you go to the city council and they say, oh, actually, we can't do it. It's the mayor. And the mayor says, no, it's a state issue, right? People do that all the time. It is a tactic that people in power use to not have to fix issues. And so if you are targeting the council and the school board and the state, too many people, you won't be able to apply enough pressure, you'll lose. So it's very important to have a clear target. How do we get from a problem to a strong issue? It's a good question. But Before that, do people have any examples of times or, you know, movements that they've worked on where there wasn't a clear target?
I actually have a question.
Go for it.
Can you hear me? What do you do? So say you go to your city council with a specific issue and you're going to a specific person and everything. What do you do if they just keep passing the buck on and on up to the higher ups and everything, and you eventually get to a point where you can no longer put pressure on that person? What are you supposed to do then?
Ooh, that is a great question. Which we can talk about a little bit later on when we have tactics. But some of this goes down to the issue being winnable. Oh, people can't see me. So, you know, if you cannot apply enough pressure to your target, who is the person that you said, okay, this is the person who really has the power to do it. It's this person, or it's not happening. If you can't apply enough pressure to that one person to make it happen, then maybe that issue is not winnable. That being said, do try a lot of things. And there are some people who have influence over your main target. They're called secondary targets, right? And so sometimes if you can't directly pressure the first one, you can pressure the secondary targets to pressure that one. So for example, say the mayor is the person who can do the thing. You can pressure the mayor, but the mayor won their election by only 70 votes. In Montgomery County, where I live, the current county executive, who's like the mayor, he won his last election by 77 votes. So very pressurable, right? If you know, okay, well, it was a close election and this one community organization or developer or whatever gave enough money to their campaign or was the deciding factor in them winning, this person or this group has a lot of influence over the primary target, and they're easier for us to pressure because they really care about what have you. You pressure them so they can pressure the others. When I was a student organizer in college, and a third of the faculty at my college were adjunct professors. So they were hired on a class-to-class short-term basis for, you know, a short amount of money. And many of them were teaching mini classes at the same university over 40 hours a week, but still were contractors. So they had no health care. Some were making $25,000 a year for teaching over 40 hours. They were upset, wanted a union. We had over 1,000 people, students, etc., which was over a sixth of the university at the time, signed a petition to, you know, for the university to negotiate a union contract with them, did a bunch of things. None of that worked on the chancellor or head of the university. They took those petitions, threw them in the trash, would not even give us a meeting. So we went after someone that could influence them. Some funders that gave a lot of money to the university and influenced its News and World Report ranking had an event to show that the university wasn't racist. The university was 15 minutes away from where Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson. Everyone was trying to prove that they weren't racist, right? We staged some students while the funders were there and pretty much said, this university is racist. Don't give money to it. Chancellor was embarrassed. The funders were like, should we not give money to the university? We got a meeting 3 days later, right? And so secondary targets can be important. You need to really know what influences your target in order to be able to win. But if you do a lot of analysis and find that you still can't influence the target and try a lot of things, you may need to choose a different issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful. And then, yes, so Anybody been in campaigns or, you know, movements, etc., where there wasn't a clearly defined target, or there was confusion on like who the target was? Money often and profit often influences targets, absolutely. True. Okay, so that's good. It seems like people have either seen a lot of movements where like they didn't define the issue at all, or they defined the issue and had a clear target, which is great. Perfect. So we went over targets. So you know you need a clearly defined issue, right? That specific, winnable, clear target actually matters to, you know, your base constituency or whatever, is significant enough. All those things. You know you need it. How do you know that you're choosing the right issue that'll be effective? All those things. How do you get from a problem to an issue? There are a few things you can do, right? You can do research, right? Is this effective? And then you can do participatory action research. Has anyone heard of participatory action research before? And if so, could you briefly tell us what it is? Surveys can be a tool in participatory action research, absolutely. Problem interviews, exactly. And so participatory action research is where you as a community do research within your community, right? And as community members yourselves, to say, okay, what do we think about the problem? Say it's Black Lives Matter and a bunch of you are having issues with the police. Well, let's talk to our community members who, you know, are having these issues with the police. What do they want? You know, say it's educational equity. Let's talk to the students that aren't doing well. What do they think the problem is, right? Definitely. So you can use a mix of research, but also talking to the people most affected by the problem and incorporating them in the research to really refine your issue and make sure that you're trying to solve the right thing. A few just good questions to think about when you're trying to define your issue and test it is, you have one thing, it's Black Lives Matter, you think, and you're defunding the police, and you think what you want to do is you want to take police out of schools, sure, right? And so you have an idea, and then you do a bit of a turf analysis, right? And you say, okay, is anyone doing something similar to this in any other cities, etc.? You know, has anyone tried this? If not, why haven't they tried this before? Or why doesn't the solution already exist? Has anyone tried it in the past? Were they successful? Why not? What are the attitudes towards the issue, goal, or solution I'm trying to do? Particularly, what are the attitudes towards the solution within like my group, the people that I organize with, my team, but also among other people, right? And then, are any things going to be big obstacles to this issue that I'm choosing? And does this issue provide any particular or special opportunities? Things to think about, right? So I've talked a lot. Let's go to a breakout room. So we are going to break out into small groups for the next 10 minutes, maybe a bit less. And we're going to talk about a few things. You're gonna identify a specific issue for the problem that you're already working on or would like to work on. And you're gonna talk about, is this a good issue? Is it specific, significant, winnable, clear target? And then what research and testing have you done or will you do to further develop and refine this issue? And are there any more things that you can do differently? And so most people will be in groups with people working on similar issues, but still talk about these things. Feel free to have these guiding questions lead you to others as well. And after 10 minutes or less, we're going to come back to this larger group and share the main points of our discussions and our findings. So anybody have any questions about that?
Are these breakout rooms in our teams?
Yeah, I'm gonna actually go ahead and just say what are the breakout rooms and the teams. So we have steps in breakout room 1, facilitated by Avery. And then, so that's everyone in steps. And then breakout 2, different from steps, it's step without an S, with facilitators John and Lulit. Then we have Fridays for Future, I believe that's what that stands for, with Wendy in breakout room 3. Then we have folks working on disability rights issues, I think in a wide variety of teams, with Ethan. And then breakout room 5 is DC Teens Action with Vito and Summer. Breakout room 7 is, numbers are a little weird. Breakout room 7 is OHS with Olivia. Breakout room 8 is, breakout room 8 is Youth Advocating for Comprehensive Education with Lynn. Breakout room, and then Annalise, I'm gonna go ahead and put you with DC Teens Action, the DC Teens Action group. So let me just do that real quick before I go through. Okay, and then we have breakout room 10 with facilitator Simon on racial justice. Breakout room 11 is also a teamless group with Meraki working on climate education and climate change. Any questions or comments before I put everyone into or any issues with breakout rooms? Speak now or forever hold your truth, or whatever that phrase is. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and open all breakout rooms, and then we'll be back here in 10 minutes. And Danielle and I will be in the main room in case anyone gets booted out. I can redirect people back into their groups. And then also, if you need any help, I'll go ahead and send Danielle in. All right, rooms are open now. All right, folks, everyone's back in the main room. It seems like I saw that everyone was there to the last second, so it seemed like that conversation probably could have gone on a little bit longer. So that sounds really good. Danielle, I'll pass it back to you to facilitate the share out.
Perfect. This is one of my favorite parts. So which person would like to go first to share what their group came up with?
I can go ahead and share first for my group. So I was with students who are at Equitable Public Schools. We're talking about like education equity, and one thing we've been focused on for a long time is the boundary analysis, which, like, for those who don't know, just like changing the school boundaries to like eliminate like de facto segregation in our county. And we were thinking like there's been like so much trouble influencing like the Board of Education. Maybe we can do like a secondary target like Danielle talked about, and go to like some of those like wealthy like white and Asian parents who are influencing the process, and like preventing recommendations and changes from being made. But we had like no idea like how to go from there, like how to actually influence these parents.
I'll first ask, so your issue is change the school boundaries?
Yeah.
So is that issue specific, or how is that issue specific, winnable, significant, and having a clear target?
We think that by changing boundaries, like the allocation of resources and just quality of education will be drastically changed and like improved for every student. Like it just makes things like a lot more equitable in terms of like quality of education and like allocation of resources. So it does a lot with like one fell swoop.
Perfect. And so what does the bigger group think? Do we think it's a good issue? If so, type a thumbs up in the chat or say good issue. Interesting. So there might be some, we have a few people saying good issue.
And there were some thumbs up as well, Danielle.
Ah, I can't see them. That makes sense. And then what research or testing will or can you guys do to make sure it's a good issue?
We can definitely just try to like gauge like how people are feeling about it in the county, because if there's like a lot of people against it, then maybe that's not really like worth our time.
And did you all discuss any methods you'll do to kind of gauge how people feel about it?
We had some technical difficulties, and I was a facilitator, and I was only able to come in like 5 minutes to the end, so we did not get to discuss that.
Okay, so some things to think about, and Steps also mentioned a question of, okay, how do we engage parents? So great things. Everybody give a clap for Steps and Avery for being the presenter. Beautiful. And what group would like to go next?
Jackie, did you want to share? I saw you were off of mute. But
No, I think somebody else in my group was.
Okay.
Yeah, I was with the disabilities rights group with Jackie, but I want to give one of my one of the participants in the Zoom the chance to go. But if no one else wants to do it, I can definitely take it on.
I can talk. So we all started off with like a bunch of different issues, and so it was most of the time we spent was trying to figure out how to narrow it down to one issue, because disability rights is just like a big spectrum that is just a lot needs to be done. But the issue we came up with was having more education on disabilities, and just sharing that disability, the experiences of people with disabilities, just to educate people who don't necessarily face the injustices that people with disability face. So just like sharing personal stories and just like educating people without disabilities on the, I guess, disabled experience is pretty much what our issue was.
And I'll ask, what made you all choose that issue over others? And what were some of the others that you discussed?
One of the issues that I don't have a disability, but I have been advocating for disability rights, and I've been focusing on accessibility in public schools. And some of the other people were talking about ASL course offerings, and another participant also talked about being included in their schools, and how special ed students are kind of often put into other schools, and it makes it harder for them to, I guess, be included into gen ed and stuff like that. And so I think a lot, and then another participant came out and said that they thought that there wasn't much, I guess, education really on typically people with disabilities aren't given like a voice and often talked over, and like so we just all kind of decided to just talk about educating, because I think at the end of the day, like, it starts with educating people first before we I guess promote change.
Okay. And what do people think about that issue? Some people say good issue. Okay. And how is that issue specific, winnable, significant, and have a clear target?
I can take it.
I can.
Oh, go.
Oh, I can try and answer this.
Go ahead.
So, I guess it's specific and targetable. I think we kind of discussed first having this, like, sharing people with disability stories to, like, kids. I guess I think the way I interpreted was kids of our own age, to kind of increase awareness amongst ourselves. So in that sense, we have like a pretty clear target and goal of how we're going to accomplish increasing awareness. Significance, obviously, is giving back people with disabilities a voice that they're robbed from in the general like school system. And winnable, I think it's pretty, not necessarily easy, but it's easier to appeal to younger people's emotions, especially. So I don't know. I think it's a pretty good approach.
Okay. And I'm going to push back a little bit. You know, we often say targets aren't like a group of people, but is a specific person with a name, a face, and an address that can give you what you want. Would you say your target is that specific?
Not yet.
Okay. So some work.
I think I'd jump in there, and I think our focus is more on education because the nature of the issue that we're focusing on is the students, and I don't think any one student has enough power to focus on them individually. So I think it's important to educate young people on this issue because young people are the ones who are going to be future leaders. And if we start early and raise awareness about the issue and the plights that disabled students go through, I think that's a really important thing, especially if we're able to do it across the country and in schools like our group kind of represents.
Okay, nice. This is actually a really great point to bring up. Doesn't just have you mentioned. Yes, this is actually a great point to bring up because a lot of the things that we're trying to win need broad support, like numbers, sometimes movements, in order to win them. And so there needs to be that education on why the issue is important, why it matters, what the solution is, to really make sure that there's enough support to get it done. And so often education campaigns like this one are really well coupled with specific advocacy or direct action campaigns. And sometimes you'll need an education campaign before you have an issue or advocacy campaign, right? And so before you expand voting rights, you're gonna need a campaign about why voting is important, right? Or so on and so forth. One thing I will say about education campaign and organizing, right? Going back to this slide, there are multiple different types of organizing. Direct service, education organizing, which is what this would be. And towards that other half, advocacy, mobilizing, and direct action organizing. It's important that, like, if you have education campaigns, that you don't exclusively have education campaigns, but you also have an advocacy campaign or direct action campaign to go along with it. Because we want to make sure that in our organizing and in educating, that it serves a larger purpose that can, change institutions, and that particularly challenges existing power relationships. One thing that makes education campaigns kind of difficult sometimes is it can be very difficult to determine whether you've won or not. Mm-hmm. At what point do you win and educate? Did we educated 30 people? We educated 50? And then, say you educate 50 people, how do you know that your education changed their thinking? And how do you measure that, right? And so with advocacy or direct action campaign coupled with it, you can say, okay, we educated people, and because of that, they are willing to vote yes on this ballot question. So you measured it with that advocacy campaign, etc.
That's great advice. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then you can have like a clear target with that too. Okay, very nice. And definitely applause for our two brave presenters there. And then, am I the right one? Nope. Who is our next presenter?
Um,
I can present.
Beautiful.
All right. I'm Aaron Kiao. And something that ours may be a little bit different because something that we are very early in the planning stages of for, I guess, the start of next school year is a letter writing campaign where we're planning on writing letters to members of our county council or our state legislators to push a bill, hopefully, to push a bill that will hopefully begin, to hopefully end poverty. Of course, that's not going to happen just with one letter writing campaign, but of course, that's the end goal. In our breakout rooms, because we're really early in the planning stages, we came to the conclusion that we should focus on unemployment as our specific issue, unemployment as our issue because right now with COVID-19, unemployment rates across the country are really high, and that's no different in Montgomery County and Maryland. And the reason why we found it, the reason why it's because it's significant in Montgomery County or Maryland is because unemployment will eventually lead to an increase in the rate of poverty within MoCo or in Maryland, and then this could cause countless more issues that are followed through an increase in poverty.
And what's the name of your group again?
Oh, Stewards to End Poverty. That.
Perfect, thanks.
And then because we're really early in the planning stages, we hadn't exactly honed in on a specific bill or piece of legislation that we can push to these legislators. So what we have planned is a call or meeting with Delegate Jared Solomon and a representative from a wider circle, and hopefully they're able to help us find a bill that we can help push in Annapolis or in the county council.
Okay, very good. And you have a little bit of research in there in talking to, experts and advocates at a wider circle, right? Which is a well-known organization that provides a lot of homelessness services and other things. Mm-hmm. Those who don't know. Okay, and politician. Now, in some ways, employment seems like a problem, like it's a general condition that we don't want. What are some possible solutions that you all are thinking of or might have discussed to unemployment?
Well, because we're really early in the planning stages, we're not entirely sure on the specific piece of policy or the specific solution that we want to help achieve through this letter writing campaign. And hopefully when we have this call with Delegate Jared Solomon or the policy representative from a wider circle, hopefully they're able to help us narrow down the options as to what is already on the floor in our county council or in Annapolis, or find an issue that isn't on the floor already, but is something that we can help push that will hopefully help increase the employment rate in Montgomery County or Maryland.
Okay, very good. Oh, I can't hear you anymore if you're still talking.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, very good.
I'm not talking.
But yeah, that's perfect. And that's great because you're kind of at an early stage of this campaign. You're still developing okay, what will our issue be? And some of that research and testing there is good, talking with experts. And maybe you could even do some participatory action research to, mm-hmm. talk to people who are unemployed and say, what are the main obstacles?
Mm-hmm. I have a quick question about that. When we're doing a survey of people that are unemployed, it would make the most sense to go through an organization such as a wider circle that would have the resources where we're able to conduct a survey, right?
Possibly. And that's a question to, ask them, as a possible ally in this, what support are they willing to provide? And, who do they have access to? So you're definitely talking to the right people to kind of find these things. That's a really good start. And also, you know, applause, big ups for this presenter. And then who do we have next?
May I present next?
So my group
Go
is
for it.
climate change and education. So
I'm sorry, I got two people.
Wait, is it supposed to be a number order?
I
Or
don't think there's an order, but it seems like Lily, were you presenting? Also, who's the other person presenting? We can figure out. Let's figure out an order just so we can make this. So we have DC Teens Action that needs to present, and then Lily's group. Who else needs to present?
Change in education.
There's a climate group. So let's do FFF. Okay, let's do Gabrielle, why don't you go ahead, and then we can have Lily's group, and then FFF, and after that the other climate group, and then we'll assess from there. Does that work?
cool. So hi, I'm from the DC Teens Action Group. I'm just posting my main things. Oh gosh, it looks like a lot of text in the chat so that it's easier to follow what I'm saying. But yeah, so our broad goal is to strengthen student representation in various school districts, including Fairfax County and a few others. And our tentative specific goal is to get a voting SMOB in each school district. So like for context in MCPS, as a lot of the people on the call know, there's a student member of the board, which like the whole county students, I think middle school and high school, vote for, and they get to be on the county board of education, and they get to vote on the board of education. But like in Fairfax County, for example, they have a SMOB, but the SMOB doesn't get to vote. And then in DCPS, they have like these two students who are kind of like a SMOB, but like they're not even voted in by the students, and most of my friends in DCPS don't even know that they exist. This goal could address a variety of issues. For example, like if the students in a school district want to push their district to end a police contract, or to adopt a more sustainable electricity practices or something like that, like having a voting member on the Board of Education would just help out all these future issues. So like we're not really addressing one specific issue other than like lack of representation, but like we are kind of, our goal is like to set up this thing that could help students address future issues. And our participatory action research is, we're planning to start out with a call series with students from several different public school systems, which I listed in the chat, to determine, like if many students actually want this for respective school systems, because we know like a bunch of students we talk to in one county want it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing for every county. And just because we talk to like what we think is a bunch of students, that doesn't mean it's actually a lot. So we need to do that. And then the other research we're going to do is have a call with my state senator who co-sponsored the bill that got MCPS the right to, or the MCPS SMOB the right to vote, which only was like as of 2017 or something. I don't know which questions I didn't hit. But yeah, sorry.
That was perfect. You hit all of them. So very nice. It looks like you have some potential targets, which are the people that you are meeting with. And yeah, what do people think generally of that issue? Is it specific, winnable, significant, and clear target?
Yeah, I think it's definitely significant. And like as a MoCo student, or I don't know, like a former MoCo student, this SMOB holds a lot of influence and electoral power in the county, and especially over the past 2.5 years, the SMOB has sort of, their position within the county has been elevated even further, and it's also pushed the boundaries of what a SMOB is expected to do. And I think after Eric Guerci, which was like 2016, like a couple years ago, once I think 2 or 3 SMOBs ago, we had a SMOB who sort of raised the bar for what a SMOB is expected to do, and sort of bridged that gap between just being like an elected official and turning them more into a prominent figure, especially in like the activist sphere within our county. And that's sort of
very good.
It's sort of become. Oh.
I'm going to cut you off a little bit just for the sake of time. But absolutely. So it seems like it's really significant. So that's perfect. And clear target, very winnable. So that's also a very good issue. Okay. Claps for that, presenters and the people who gave feedback. And then we have Lily's group next.
Okay, hi. My group is called Youth Advocating for Comprehensive Education, if you want to put that. Or you can just shorten it to YACE, if that's easier. But yeah, so we are a education reform organization based in Houston, Texas, and we have a lot of goals. But the goal we focused on for this is diversifying the resources that classrooms use to include more people of color history, and then more people of color authors in English classes, and just like including like diversifying curriculums basically. And we mentioned like that this would probably be the most direct cause to achieve, because we can really like go after like teachers and the people who like create the curriculums as a target. And then we're also working with Diversify Our Narrative, which is a pretty large organization that has compiled a bunch of resources to help organizations like us diversify curriculums in school. So, yeah.
Very nice. And it's definitely specific. You want more people of color in history and authors, so maybe social studies and English classes. Okay, very good. Clap for that presenter. And we have a last group of climate change.
We have a couple more groups. We have about
2 more groups.
So we have Fridays for Future, and then we have another climate group, and then finally we have, I think, OHS AIA.
So we'll have Fridays for Future go first.
Okay. Hi, I'm Madrid. I'm representing Fridays for Future right now. We're working on rebranding, so this is not a final name for us. But our issue is Superfund sites, which are basically toxic waste dumps designated by the EPA for priority for cleanup. It has intersectionality with like racial justice also, but like it's mostly like an environment or climate issue. I'm blanking. So what are the topics again? Sorry, I'm like blanking on what we're supposed to.
Is the solution specific?
Okay, so the solution, because of the nature of the Superfund law, which is CERCLA, CERCLA, and like the law and like the legal kind of like classifications and everything, it's kind of a difficult thing to win. The winnability, but the thing is that there is, we're kind of working on like getting a law passed. Basically, it's like there needs to be a tax. So there needs to be a tax on chemicals and other and petroleum that will feed into the Superfund trust fund, which cleans up the Superfund sites. That I think is our major goal, but it's very cloudy because we're still working on it because there's not a lot of awareness about this issue. It's really like, it seems niche, but it's actually like everywhere. It's really topical because in my home state of New Jersey, we have the most amount of Superfund sites. It's like over 200, and then around the country, it's like 1,000, like over 1,000.
And so that's a great example of something that may also need an education campaign coupled with it. But very good, and also super specific. You know, you want to pass a certain law that taxes certain sites. So like, very good. And thanks for presenting. And then we'll have the second climate group.
So my climate group is called Climate or Education. We haven't really come up with a specific group name, but that's what we have for right now. And so the problem that we're working on is getting climate in school and like in the curriculum. Right now in Nebraska, and they basically only spend 1 day on climate education, and it's like falsified facts, so they're not even teaching it properly. So what we're going to work on is just something in the curriculum or creating an outside program that will teach kids, elementary, middle school, and high schoolers about climate change and the specifics about climate change, like stepping them through the scientific process and like how everything works and what they can actually do to help lessen their carbon footprint. So I guess that's the issue, and it's really significant because we've seen that when you educate people about climate change and they understand what they can actually do, then that will lead to like a significant increase in people actually caring and people doing something about climate change rather than just sitting on their butt saying that they can't do anything. And then I think it's winnable. There's this, we have to talk to the superintendent and the curriculum members right now. Then I haven't been able to meet with the curriculum people because of COVID, but I think it's going to the superintendent to talk about climate change and like how we can incorporate something else into our system that would educate people on it. And then I guess that's our target as well. Although our target is just to get climate change in the curriculum and to kind of teach people the scientific process of it. And then for research, then we're going to have to probably look to other districts that have like incorporated climate change actually into the system, and then also possibly look at other groups that have been created to force climate change into the curriculum, and probably also look at outside of like other people who have started outside groups who have like for to educate people on climate change.
Very nice, very nice. It sounds like it meets all that criteria, your issue, including a clear target, which sounds like the superintendent. And I'm sure after your research, you will clarify that target and you have some good research to go along to. So thanks to your group and thank you for presenting. Very nice, very nice. And then we'll move to OSHA. I might have typed that wrong, but you all know who you are and can correct me.
Are you talking about the OHS AIA?
Yes, OHS AIA.
Okay, so it stands for OHS as an action, and OHS is just for our school, Oregon High School. And so we are a really new allies group that's going to be working with the Minority Student Union at our high school in this coming school year. So we haven't started anything yet. We've just started this summer, so we're really new, I guess. And we have a lot of different goals at our school that we want to work on, but one that we talked about a lot was the lack of minority representation in curriculums. So we have a lack of diversity in general, I would say, at our school, and there's no education about modern day racism, and there isn't really any history about people of color or anything like that in our school curriculums. We read pretty whitewashed books, all of that. So Olivia gave us some really good ideas about possibly hosting campaigns for English teachers and having fundraisers to buy books. So that was really helpful. But otherwise, we want to talk to administration and the school board. We're still really new, I guess, in this process. We don't have a lot of the other things figured out. I guess we don't have specific goals yet.
And so what's some research that you will do to kind of specify some of your goals and targets?
So I think working with the Minority Student Union is going to be really helpful with us because they've been around for a lot longer than we have, and what the main goal of our group is to advocate for what they want, since they are the people that should be making the decisions. It's not really our things to say, I guess, as an ally group. So we're hoping to just like uplift and amplify what they have, but we're hoping that we can kind of go through the curriculums and books in the different classes and find ways to substitute those lessons and those things with more diversified things, if that makes sense.
Okay, very nice, very nice. And that's great. It seems like you've already identified kind of in your mission a group that you'll work with a lot and do research and testing with. Okay, so very good. These are all really great things that people are working on. And it seems like people have, well-developed issues or are in a good place in terms of doing some of the research steps that they need to get there. So this is wonderful.
It seems like we have a group, though, that I was remiss to mention. Women. Sorry, Annalise, can you quickly speak on your group? Annalise, are you still there? If you're speaking, you're on mute. Okay, maybe we can get back to you. Go ahead, Danielle.
Perfect. And if we have another member of the group that might want to say a couple things about the issue, that'd be great too.
So Annalise, it was in the group with DC Teens Action, and it seemed like they separately, she was the only one representative of her group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So perfect. We can move on and come back if that is helpful. Wonderful. So at this point, we have identified our issues. Look it up. Hopefully. We have tested them. We've done some research to make sure that they're the right issues. And now we are, fairly certain that this is the issue goal or solution that we want. So what next? We have our issue. Now we create the plan to win it. So creating our plan to win. Some of us are at this point now or will be there sometime soon. One, we build our team, right? And then advisors, people who maybe through our research, we've contacted who have implemented this in other cities. Maybe some people who know a lot about the particular context and the way things work in our city or our school, who can give us critical advice on how to win this, right? So we have our team, we have our advisors, and we're creating our plan to win, which involves building our base, right? Or the main group of folks who really care about winning this issue. Maybe they are the people in our organization who we're gonna need to push this issue forward. So we might build that base and those numbers by, having workshops, events, maybe building it through an educational campaign too, other things. We have some, smaller goals or steps on our way to get to that big win. So if we are hoping to pass that law on taxing super funds, right, for climate change, we might say, get the decision maker to agree to have a meeting with us as the first step. And then do this as the second step, right? So small goals, small wins. We're going to put that on a calendar, a timeline. We're going to have benchmarks. It's going to be great. And then we're going to think about, okay, maybe you all are leading some teams. What can you individually do? And what do you individually need to do? And what can other people on your team do, right? What roles do we have? And then you're going to try that. You're going to get some feedback. You're going to review it. You're going to adjust and you're going to repeat. So we are particularly looking at advocacy and direct action organizing. We want to change institutions. And so we're going to have some campaigns, right? A campaign is an intensive, sustained, and coordinated organizing fight that uses collective power of organization numbers to strike at a target until it meets your demands. Organizing campaigns mobilize people to engage in direct action on specific issues against defined targets. Campaigns seek to redistribute power and/or resources, bring institutional change, and build grassroots leaders, right? And so campaigns often need two groups of folks, right? I've mentioned these words a lot. I'm gonna define them a little bit more. So we have our base, we'll need our base, right? These are people who share our values most of the time and also share our self-interest, right? And so these are often people in our organization. If we are in a climate change organization, they care about climate change, they come to our marches, etc. But they also share our self-interest in accomplishing the specific issue solution or getting the specific legislation that we want. Then we're going to have allies. These are people who might not be in our group, who might not share our values on most of the issues, but for this specific thing that we're fighting for, they want it to, right? And so we're going to create a lot of our plan, strategy with our base, the people who are our people on our team. And then once we have that plan, we're going to give specific tasks to our allies. But we're not going to plan with our allies, right? Great example. There are a lot of folks here from Montgomery County or the DC area and have driven by Baltimore. And you see a big tower off of I-95 that says Baltimore, like a big tower, smoke coming out of it. That is a trash incinerator. It burns trash, right? So that trash incinerator is in the middle of a working class neighborhood in Baltimore and spewing, incinerated trash over that neighborhood. A lot of kids there got asthma, right? Just bad health conditions, high rates of cancer. So the neighborhood came together, some neighborhood associations and some youth organizer groups, and they said, we're gonna try to shut this trash incinerator down, right? And so they planned with their base, which were people in their youth organization and neighborhood organization, people who care about the community, they share those values, and who they planned with in a bunch of different issues, right? Once they had that plan, they got an ally, which was the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club didn't particularly care about that neighborhood, didn't share all of the values of that youth group, and wasn't in every campaign, but the Sierra Club shared the specific self-interest of taking down that trash incinerator because they're an environmental group. They don't like environmental, pollution. So they tasked the Sierra Club with certain things, but they didn't plan with them, right? And so we need that for each of our groups as well. We have our target, we talked about that, so I won't go over that again. And then we have tactics, which are specific activities we use to apply pressure on our target in order to push the target to give you what you want, right? Tactics, super important step in a campaign, right? So we talked a little bit about types of power in the first module, right? People power, disruptive power, electoral power. We want to use tactics that are disruptive in that they are not in the wheelhouse or, they're not in the realm of things that are comfortable for our target, right? And so we want tactics that interrupt business as usual for our target and really are unfamiliar to our target. If you can have tactics that your base are really familiar with and really like, but that throw your target off guard and that your target is not familiar with, you're good. And you're that much closer to winning, right? And so it's super important that in campaigns that we have tactics that are appropriate for our base, right? And so if you have a letter writing campaign where you mail handwritten letters and have to get postage, and it's, your friends in high school, that may not be the best because many of them may not have postage. Maybe they never mail things, right? But maybe emails might be easier because you can use your phone, etc. So make sure the tactic fits, your base. So we are going to have this last breakout, and it's going to be a bit shorter. We'll have this one be 5 minutes instead of the earlier 10. And very quickly, for the issues that we identified, particularly for those who have a more developed issue, take a moment to identify, okay, who's your base that you're trying to organize? Who are your allies? And target, which many of you have already identified. And then what are 2 tactics that you can use on your target to win your issue goal? And then we'll round robin after that.
All right, we're gonna close out today's session. Thanks for everyone who voted in the poll. Got some really great feedback, so we're so glad that most of you guys are excited about the remaining sessions. If you have any constructive feedback at any time, you can fill it out in the module feedback form, or just send an email to Luli. I'm gonna go ahead and put her email if you prefer to give feedback that way. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Danielle to close out.
Perfect. And so I want to make sure that there is enough time at the end for people to go over any questions that they have, etc. So for this share back, it'll be much quicker, and you can just briefly list your base, allies, and 2 tactics, and then we'll move on from there. And then we will go in reverse order this time, so the people who were last will go first and vice versa. So we will start with the women's group if they are still there.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I really found that this the presentation helped me to discover how to challenge existing relationships or community ideas that I hadn't really like perceived in a certain way before. So that was great to hear, and now I know to come away from this how I can better engage the members of my team to reach out to people of the community who are working in certain systems. And we know we need to have specific issues that we're fighting for, and how we can use those issues to eliminate prejudice and challenge the targets that we want to affect.
Absolutely. Success. So who's your base for your issue?
So our base is basically young women, so girls in high school and college ages. So basically like the scholars, sort of leaders of tomorrow, because we want to empower these women to know that they can make a difference and they can lead action to fight for rights that women haven't had for a while or ever, and that haven't been fought for clearly enough. And to also know that these rights that have to do with health, access, and sustainability are really affecting all different aspects. And in the name of fighting for like racial justice and climate justice and educational access, all of these things intersect. And basically to educate young women how we can be part of the struggle for justice.
Very nice. And do you have any allies?
I guess broadly, we are looking for older women, so like people accomplished in their fields, or activists who inspire others already to effectively educate and inspire the younger students. And hopefully it will be a mutual sort of learning experience and relationship that through different workshops, which we're calling life shops, these events will facilitate like growth in many ways.
Okay. And what's your issue again?
Our issue is women's rights, but extending to basically empower women to be leaders of the justice movement.
Okay. Nice. One thing I might recommend on that issue is seeing how you can make sure that you have a clear target and a clear way to measure if you've won it or not. But very good. Women's rights and adding some detail to that. And then 2 tactics.
Okay, so one tactic that we're looking at right now is, and this is kind of a more specific issue, is I noticed how silence is sort of debilitating to action. So like if someone's neutral, it can actually shut down whole movements, and being like firmly on one side propels like the activism and advocacy forward. So one focus of our educational tactics would be to decrease bystanding as like inactivity, and to increase like bystander intervention maybe, or just like action in general.
Okay.
And yeah, I haven't really thought of another tactic, but our team is going to email primarily. So yeah, that'll be like a logistical tactic.
Sounds good. So one thing that I kind of change is my put increase bystander intervention as like an aim or goal, and then email a thing that you use to accomplish that. Okay, so very good. And then we'll make the other ones real quick so we have time for questions at the end. OHSAIA, what is who's your base and who are your allies?
Okay,
Thanks for presenting.
so we would say that our base is like the people who also care about minority students and how the educational system like doesn't fully represent them.
Okay, and who are your allies?
Our allies would probably be our minority student union at our school.
Okay, very good. So, okay, so your base being kind of the people in your group, and like students who like might join your group who care about minority students, and then the allies being the minority student union. Beautiful. And two tactics.
Two tactics. One of them would probably be have minority students share their experiences through videos, forums, articles, or just like share outs. Another one is to have a fundraiser so we're able to buy more books written by people of color.
Okay, very nice. One thing I'll suggest is make sure in your issue to have more minority representation in the curriculum. Whatever your target is, that your tactics are particularly aimed at that target and influencing who it is. Videos and forums can do that depending on the target. So very good. And thanks for presenting.
Yeah.
And then we have, and we have our climate group who's trying to get climate education in the curriculum. Who's your base there?
So for us, our base would be, the founder of the movement, and also possibly environment club at our school, and then we're planning on sending out a survey to other people that are also interested in getting more climate education in the school district. So those could also be our base.
And do you have any allies?
Yeah, so our allies we were thinking would be the PTA or other group to help us kind of contact the administrators.
You said that was PTA?
Yeah, like the PT.
Perfect allies. They're not with you on all the issues. They're not like environmental club, but they might care about this issue. And two tactics.
So one of the tactics would be to email the superintendent to try to get a meeting set up, and another tactic would be to have a prepared proposal based off of like groups that have done something similar in changing the climate curriculum.
Very nice. So have a clear proposal that like this is, or like a policy paper, something like that, a fact sheet. This is how it's been done. Great one. And then real quick, my computer's frozen. No, it's not. Also, thanks for presenting. We will have Fridays for Future. What are your base allies and tactics?
So our base, we're working on like increasing right now is we're contacting environmental clubs across the state of New Jersey, especially focusing on ones that are like directly affected by a Superfund site. sites. Also,
environmental clubs and
yeah.
allies.
Allies would be we're going to contact like interest groups and other advocacy organizations in our state, especially like local ones. And our one tactic would be kind of organizing with the interest group or advocacy group and kind of setting up a webinar to kind of reach out to their elderly or senior citizen demographic that they can easily reach through webinars. And also
Very nice.
talking to like reaching out to staff people, our staffers on our local senator or our senators and representatives. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. And YACE, your base, allies, and tactics.
Okay, so our base would be students passionate about education reform.
Okay.
Just students, I guess. But then our allies, we have a couple different allies. Organizations that are also focused on education reform, either within Texas or within the U.S. Board of Education members, and yeah, that's and then our tactics. Right now, we're working on a large kickoff event to get the attention of parents because they are voting members. And then also contacting Board of Education members that can help us.
Okay, very good. So you got a kickoff event and contacting officials, maybe through emails or what have you. DC Teens, base, allies, and tactics. Thanks for presenting.
Okay, I'll talk because I don't know where Gabrielle is. So our base would be DC Teens Action members in counties all across the DMV, but also just students in general who are interested in having a small with voting rights. Our allies would be Maryland state legislators who supported the voting rights bill in MCPS, or past MCPS students or current MCPS students who like understand and realize like what having a voting mob has done for the county and like the benefits of it. And then our target would be legislators in Virginia and Maryland, other than the people who supported the bill, and then the city council in DC, as well as school board members and the superintendent of respective counties. For tactic one, the first tactic we would use is like having an initial call series with like students all across the DMV who are interested in getting a voting mob in their respective counties, and then gauging interest and seeing like who's interested in who wants this to happen. And then our tactic two would be like to schedule meetings with relevant legislators in order to further a bill that would
Beautiful.
in turn get voting rights. Yep.
And thank you, that was great. And we have students to end poverty.
I don't think Aaron is here anymore, so I'll just go ahead and share kind of some of the ideas we were talking about. So for the base, he was thinking primarily people in Maryland or his peers who care about or want to learn more about the displacement of affected people by COVID. For allies, primarily since they're still in their early stages, he was thinking a wider circle, but also paralleling groups within other high schools in his community who don't necessarily have the exact same goal, but also kind of center their work around charitable things, giving back to the community.
And tactics.
So he was kind of thinking about, we were talking about gauging the voice of people who are affected by COVID-19 by doing a survey and doing that through a wider circle because they kind of have the information that they would need in order to distribute that. And just basically surveying people who are affected by food insecurity since COVID-19 affected people's incomes.
Very nice. Survey is a great tactic. Thank you, thank you. And disability rights. Oh, disability rights is gone.
I can speak.
Go for it.
So our base is students with disabilities, and we kind of took your advice and made our issue more, or our issue more focused on accommodations and the access to accommodations. So our allies would be students without disabilities, parents of students with disabilities, and then special ed teachers and just teachers, I guess, in general. And then our target would be the Board of Education or the County Council, depending on who controls what. And then our tactics were letter writing campaign and petition.
Nice. And I like how specific the base and allies are. So very good. And thank you. And last but not least, steps.
We kind of were specific with our base and allies, but we did like specific organizations. So for our base, we did One Montgomery, which is an organization that works on equitable education. Our members, and also Youth Equity, which is also another organization. Our allies are MoCo for Change, which works on more broader issues, but is also working on equitable education, and also like members of our community such as Nick Asante and Lynn Harris, Sunil Dasgupta. Yeah.
And our tactics.
Our tactics are like phone banking, but making it more demographic based. So we which kind of helps us figure out how to approach like fighting equitable education.
Very good. Beautiful. And also thanks for presenting. So these are great. These tactics that a lot of people presented are great because they're things that your base like to do, know how to do, right? But can still be disruptive. And yeah, pretty good. One note, always important to whatever you do, whether it's a phone bank, like I said, target a phone bank, petitions, letters, think, how does this affect my target? That specific person with the name, face, and address. Does my target care about this tactic, right? And how does this tactic affect the things that my target cares about? Do that, you good. And so that's pretty much it. But I will leave room for one last and winning question that folks might have before we wrap up. Is there one? Guess not. Well, I will say thank you so much for letting me talk with all of you. And I'll see you next time as we work and win our campaigns.
We have a technical question about access to the slides. So Danielle, is it possible to make the slides at least accessible via view only mode so that people can have access to the content?
Sure. There should be a link that was shared earlier. Let me look if I can find it that has this. But let me also, I'll share it again in the chat now.
Yeah, I mean, everyone should have access. It's on, I see that it's on, anyone on the internet with the link can comment. So you should be able to access these slides. But I'm going to share it again. And stick around if you're still having trouble accessing the slides, but we're going to send a follow-up email tomorrow with all the relevant information. So if folks have any issues or any questions, Danielle and I will be around. Is that cool, Danielle? You can stick around for...
Perfect.
Yeah. So it's in there. Oh, yeah. The link is... Okay, it seems like folks can see it now. So thanks for staying with us. I think it's a testament to how committed you all are to the issues that you're working on, that you were willing to stay over. And so the same gig is for module 4. We're going to do team building and relationship building. That's the same time, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern next Sunday. We'll send out all the info. I'll put the module link again for folks that may need it. Have a great Sunday, everyone. Hopefully see you all next Sunday.